Hello, world. It's me, your old pal, Dan Shaheen. Welcome to Comic Book News. It's been a while. Haven't had one of these interview format thingies for a while because, I'll be frank, it's hard. It's hard to set up guests. It's hard to get them on the timetable that kind of works with my somewhat crazy schedule as a dad and a self-employed dude. So anyway, all this goes by way of saying that today's interviewee kind of fell into my lap. A friend of the show, Craig Yo of Yo Books, is the publisher of Stephen Brower's Crime Comics Confidential. We're going to talk to Stephen today, man, all about the classic kind of golden age of crime comics. I'm not sure how much he's into current day crime comics, but maybe we'll try talking about a little bit of that stuff too, because you know what I mean? Crime is crime, right? Crime does not pay, but it does for Stephen Brower, man, because he's got a really cool package. Now, this is one of those reprint packages that is lovingly put together and is oversized. You bet we will take a look at it on the $1 Million Comics Cam. But first, a little bit of show business, okay? Hey, if you want to see your comics on self-said $1 Million Comics Cam, there's one place to send them: to the $1 Million mailbox. P.O. Box 1163, Arcata, California, 95518. Oh, man, the mailbox is fit to bursting, overflowing with amazing contributions from people all over the world. Yeah, all over the world. I get amazing comics sent to me for free, and that just thrills me in a way that's really tough to describe because I'm a cheapskate, and I love comics. So free comics, ba-bing. We love that. Okay. What else for show business? This week, I've got some other shows planned. On Friday, as usual, we've got Serious Star Trek. I'll be joining Larry Young and John Price, PhD, and we'll talk about everything Roddenberry in the world and the universe at large. Check me out on Tuesdays and maybe sometimes on Thursdays for my new show, Danger Room. Okay? Danger Room is where it's just me and I just talk about whatever. Of course, because it's me, comics are involved. So there will be comic references like at every opportunity, but not strictly. I talked about a lot of weird stuff this week, from programming with Markov chains to the Buffalo shooter and a reaction video to somebody who claims that the X-Men are not social justice oriented. I found that a little bit crazy and a little weird to talk about, but it was fun. I've got a video up on that. You can check it out. All right. Without further ado, I want to bring in our guest. But where do we can't just talk to him here in the bookshelves. We got to take him somewhere a little more comfortable.
To the Bat Pulse.
This is where I feel the most at home. It's 1966 every day of the year here. And so let's go back even further than 1966. Let's go way back in time to some of the crime comics that undoubtedly inspired the Batman, as well as so many other things that came in their wake. So today, let's welcome Stephen Brower. Hey, Stephen, welcome to Comic Book News.
Hey, how you doing, Dan?
Fantastic. Really, really glad you had time to come in today.
I love the background.
Oh, thank you.
I've never been in the Batcave before.
Well, there's a first time for everything. Actually, one of the things I want to talk about on my Danger Room stream one of these days is there was an interesting Architectural Digest article about the history of the Batcave and sort of the different iterations and stuff of it.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you a fan of comics to this day, or are you like just an old school kind of historian?
Yeah, I'm an old school fan and historian. I guess I was there. Well, I followed Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko through the '70s, and then that I left it for quite a while, and then I came back in the '90s with a renewed interest, but primarily my interests were like Golden Age and
I see.
um, Golden Age comics and Jack Kirby comics.
Because I feel like we've had a renaissance. I mean, I'm going to say now it's in the past 20, 30 years, maybe, of crime comics, where a lot of people drew not just like they drew direct inspiration from Krigstein and a lot of the other guys that you show in
Right.
the book. Guys like David Lapham, who did Stray Bullets. That's a fantastic crime comic if you ever.
Yeah, I know the book. I haven't read it.
Yeah, definitely worth reading. Really interesting to view it in light of these older comics. So I think what we should do is we should dive right in
Sure.
and take a look at the book. How do you feel about that?
Great.
All right. Well, we'll do that on this show. We do that somewhere we call the $1 Million Comics Camp. Great. All right. $1 Million Comics. $1 Million make you holla comics camp. All right. And for the first time ever, I'm going to put on the $1 Million reading spectacles, which I just bought because, well, I'm getting old.
I know the feeling.
And I'm gonna make like Bane. I'll make another Batman reference. I'm gonna make like Bane because we break spines around here, right? When I look at books, I'm gonna have on this. So let's talk about this book. This is a lovingly put together volume. It's hard to tell on this cover. It's got a nice spot varnish on it.
Yeah.
On certain parts to make it a little shiny, give it a real nice look. It's got a great hand feel. Well bound, really ready to take some abuse.
Yep.
So tell me, how did you? What made you chose this as your subject matter? I mean, obviously you're into crime comics, but what was the specific impetus for this book?
Well, I think I really like Golden Age genre comics, and probably my favorite genre is crime comics. There's, I mean, all the others, romance and westerns, I like quite a bit too. But like westerns, crime comics resonated with me because of what I grew up with. And I didn't grow up with the comics. I was too young when they were first published, but I did grow up with all the TV shows and the movies from the 30s and 40s that were shown on my little black and white television on one of the 3 or 4 channels we had then. And so Jimmy Cagney and Edward G. Robinson, and all those guys, really struck a chord with me. And so when I began reading the crime comics, it brought all that back, and it at once there was a nostalgia, but I also became really interested in sort of the American id, like why do we glorify gangsters?
I'm really glad you brought that up because that's a key point that you bring up in your opening, and I think continues to this day, right? Like this is just an American. I don't know if it's an American thing or if that's true worldwide, but definitely in America, we love our gangsters and we imbue them sometimes with more humanity and like altruistic intent than they probably had in real life, almost undoubtedly than they had in real life, right?
Yeah, it's the whole Robin Hood theory, right? And what's really interesting is Robin Hood's a fictitious character. He didn't exist in history. Yet this concept of stealing from the rich and giving to the poor there is something very American about that. And so that's how, that was my way in. That's how I explored this. And sure enough, I didn't know going in that Al Capone, for example, who I always thought was, it was all everyone agreed upon was just a horrible human being, but he was called the Robin Hood of Chicago of his time. And Dillinger, Pretty Boy Floyd, they all had that label attached to them. And there's even that Woody Guthrie song about Pretty Boy Floyd being the Robin Hood figure. So, and that's another interest of mine is folk music and Woody Guthrie, who I've written about. And so, yeah, it just seems to go, especially during hard times, that there's this fictitious someone who's going to help you out. And in the case of Pretty Boy Floyd, there's no evidence that he did anything that Guthrie writes about.
I think what Guthrie is going for there, though, and what a lot of people try to project upon these guys is it's essentially the American individuality thing, right? It's
Yes.
They are individuals against the system.
Yes.
And often even today, someone running a criminal enterprise might do great things in their neighborhood or their community in order to just like build in some protection for themselves,
right,
against testimony, prosecution, and to give themselves a little bit of shine, right? Like that's going on to this day, I think.
True. Yep.
I think the tradition also lives on, besides in gangster movies, which are a staple to this very day, but also in a lot of what they call gangsta rap music, right?
Right.
Like that's part of the whole zeitgeist that's going on here, don't you think?
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's a romanticism of it's a romanticism of criminality.
Yes. But born out of like, I don't know what, this is a little off topic, but I've been thinking about it a lot lately, how people complain about rap music and rap culture sometimes, about it being, about bitches and money and blah, blah, blah. But in my mind, all that they're doing and all that a lot of these gangsters were doing is sort of like taking the American ethos of capitalism and making money and getting mine and sort of like putting that out in front and like putting it out in a way that maybe mainstream Americans weren't comfortable with, but it's certainly the message that we're all given.
Right. And that's another cultural thing in this country, because we're a capitalist society. We respect financial success.
Yes.
Ill-gotten gains or not.
Yeah, it talks a lot about how and again, the drug culture of today comes out of a prohibition, just like the crime culture of the 20s and 30s came out of alcohol prohibition.
Right.
And so there's definitely, and both of which are greatly unpopular, like with the masses. You know what I mean? And so like you can see where there's a sort of everyman champion of the everyman getting me my booze or.
Yes, absolutely. Probably the biggest mistake the U.S. government ever made was prohibition. At least in that early part of the 20th century, because
I'll put slavery a notch above it, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. But man, did it backfire on them?
Oh yeah, and like to this, and we learned what from that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So tell me about the cover and this because I just found this really interesting.
Sure. So the cover is by Jack Cole, and it's the cover of my book, and it's from True Crime, published here, and you can see it's pretty gory and also pretty funny. They're shooting the rat. And it says rat, which means they can spell backwards as they shoot, right?
That's just what I was thinking. That's a marksman.
And Yet, and what's really interesting in Canada, they were having the same backlash against these comics as we had in the United States. We weren't alone, and in fact, they passed laws that are still on the books today. Outlaw. I'm sorry.
That shocked me when I read that in your.
Yeah. So you can't mention crime, and there's other words you can't mention, and horror comics as well. And so this is their, sanitized version. The interior is exactly the same, but their sanitized version of the same cover or the same book. And you can see they're not such good shots here.
If I have a choice of which cover I'm buying, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
There's no choice in that
Right.
one. It's a really easy one. Okay, let's talk about some of the artists that you chose.
Sure.
And why you chose them. What I want to just do is I'm going to just start going through I'll just start paging through the comics part, and we can just sort of talk about.
Sure.
See.
So it opens with Al Capone, and so the beginning of the book are the true life stories, and in the intro I cover what the actual stories were and how these veer off a bit, and so these weren't chosen so much for the art as they were chosen for the stories themselves. And so here you have Al Capone, and it's not too inaccurate, and it does not portray him as a good guy.
That's what I was going to say. This one seemed like a straight ahead, almost documentary style.
Yeah.
I haven't read, full warning, I have not read every comic in this book.
Right.
Part of it is that they're very dense. Like the style of comics back then was a lot more wordy.
Yeah, very wordy. That's the thing you get used to reading these old comics. Every now and then, you'll see at the end of the book, I think with the Alex Toth, they tone down the writing and the imagery really takes over. But man, God bless the artists for being able to work around all these words.
And speaking of the artists, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and Pretty Boy Floyd. And so here you have one of my favorites, which is Mort Meskin. And I've written about Mort.
I almost thought this was Alex Toth. I almost thought it was Alex Toth at first glance. Don't you think?
The Meskin? Oh, that's interesting.
She's sort of some of this line work and not the lettering, obviously, but like some of it. It just reminds me of Toth, and I wasn't aware of Meskin.
Yeah, Toth was a big Meskin fan. He wrote about Meskin.
Oh, well, there you go. That makes perfect sense. I can hear my daughter awake, by the way. And
do you need to go?
No, I don't. She's okay. She's playing with the doggy, and she's good. I can see her. She knows how to get a hold of me, but there's a chance she'll need me, okay? So.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Completely understandable.
As much as I want to talk, as I like to abandon my children to talk about comics, I've done enough of that.
One nice thing about the Meskin is there's a nice noir quality to it, and not all the stories have that, but Meskin does, and when we get to Mardenstein, I think he does too.
That's interesting because I always think of that as sort of like that's what I think of when I think about crime comics, but that might be because the more modern guys like Frank Miller and everybody, they definitely seem to steer towards that noir chiaroscuro lighting and other tropes that define that.
Yeah, Miller really made a style out of it, and Steranko as well.
I just want to say the level of craft, man, back in those days, it was so high for what was considered juvenile throwaway stuff.
I know. For $10 a page.
I love the part where you talked about the not the House Un-American Activities, but the juvenile, the Estes Kefauver stuff.
Right.
And where my favorite part was like they brought in the comic strip artists who were, it was like Walt Kelly and these guys who were like held in incredibly high esteem, were read by pretty much like the whole country, right? Back then,
Right.
like the comic strips were considered just the highest form, but yet the comic book was not just not considered as such high art, but was considered a real problem.
Yeah.
On juvenile delinquency.
Yeah. No, it is amazing. I mean, the comic strip artists of that era, and it was beginning to end, but they were millionaires. And, you would see them in beer endorsements and house product endorsements on the cover of Time magazine. They were superstars of their day, and yet, hardly anybody really knew who was creating these comics.
The comic books as opposed to the strips, right?
Where the strip books,
guys they were household names, and these guys often didn't even have credits in the comics themselves. So,
right,
how terrible is that?
Yeah.
And I think, ultimately, I'm definitely not going to belittle the strip artists of those days, because their level of craft was excellent as well, and they had such a larger platform to present those strips in back then. But these guys were just work-a-day kind of working cartoonists, making things happen, honestly, and inventing the medium as they went along.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Because it was different than strips. It was a long form of storytelling that hadn't been told before, or rarely told before. Comics go back to Toffler in the 17th century, and so, or the 18th century, and so there had been some, but nothing really like this, and the way they churned it out as well.
Yeah, amazing, at an amazing clip, but with still like they had professional standards, so they were drawing I think I just want to assume at the top of their abilities, certainly for what they were being paid. I think they were delivering amazing levels of quality.
Well, what's great too is you can see the experimentation going on with the page layout, with storytelling. It was all new. It's like the early days of rock and roll, or the early days of jazz, where they were creating. I mean, I guess that's one of the attractions for me of old comics is, how do you create something like that? And it wasn't out of thin air, because there were comic strips before, but it certainly was a whole new ball game. And
it's very different, right? It's very different. It's even bigger, I would say, than the difference between making a movie and making a television show, right? Like it's a different aspect ratio, different pacing, different storytelling techniques for between panels, different words that you could put. So many differences that these guys didn't have a model to go after, and that's why I think comics evolve. That's why I think you're rarely going to see this many words on a page, let alone this many in a balloon anymore. And I just think those were things they had to figure out the hard way over time.
Right. Movies did influence those guys, though, because there was a contest between Jerry Robinson, Mort Meskin, and I think Bernie Klein, and maybe George Russo's, for how many times they could sit and watch Citizen Kane in the theater. And Meskin won. I think he saw it 40 times.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, so they were being influenced as much by film as they were by comic strips, I think.
And I'm going to want to say that at least some of the films must have been somewhat influenced by, guys that might have been reading crime comics and
right. And the pulps. Yep.
and especially probably more the pulps, but I think there's got to be a connection. Oh man, when I look at just this one, who is this? Is this Toth?
That's Marvin Stein.
Oh man,
He's actually, in my humble opinion, I think he's one of the best at the genre, and he's sort of unrecognized.
Oh, I didn't recognize him, but it shot me in the eyeballs. Like,
yeah, very noir, very dramatic. He was part of the Simon and Kirby studio.
Oh, okay.
And when he was with them, he worked more in their style. And then after they split up, he continued on, but in a much more noir style. And I just think he's amazing.
I think it's great stuff. I'm really fairly ignorant on the Golden Age stuff, but I've been mostly through my guests been coming around to guys like Dan Baker,
right?
Who I never didn't know that name, and now he's one of the guys I'll never forget because just ahead of his time.
Yeah,
really great stuff here. Like they're drawing from some of the photorealistic kind of Alex Raymond-ness, but like definitely more on the cartoony side, right? Like definitely a little more, but pulling in some of that stuff, I think, to add a little reality to it. Really, really good looking.
Yeah, look at that face.
Yeah,
I know.
Oh man. Yeah, really, really, really good stuff of people too that also, their influence, like we said, were the comic strips and they weren't reading superhero comics necessarily, and that almost certainly was not an influence on their styles.
Right.
These guys are too old school. Yeah, it's really amazing stuff. Tell us a little bit about the production values on this. Like, where did these come from? Were these shot from original comics?
I scanned them all.
Did a really nice job cleaning them up. They don't have that look.
Oh, thank you. Actually, I have to give a big thanks to Clesia and Craig. Clesia was really involved in the production of the book, and it came out beautiful.
Thank you. Friend of the show, Craig Yo. By the way, we had a nice interview with him not long ago that was really a lot of fun.
Oh, he's great.
That guy, come on, his resume is like amazing. It's like nobody I've ever talked to before.
He's not like anybody. You want to hear a quick Craig Yo story?
Yes.
Okay, so about 12 years ago, I invited Craig to come speak to my undergrad students up in Scranton. We have what's called
I'm going to interrupt you, Mark, for 1 second, okay? I want you to tell this story, and I have to go check on my daughter while you tell the story.
Okay, great. Perfect timing.
Go ahead. Just go ahead.
Okay, so Craig and Clesia came up about 12 years ago for the Stretch Conference, which is a conference for the whole university, but it's mainly for the graphic design and illustration students. And so Craig was speaking to the group. There were about, 30, 40 in the group. And he was about to show a video, and the video broke down. We couldn't get the video going. And without missing a beat, he walked into the audience and started a conga line, and had a conga line go all the way around all the tables, and then out into the hall, and then back and out until the video was up. And then he, walked everybody or congoed everybody back to their seats, went right up to the podium and kept talking. In all my years of going to conferences and seeing speakers, I've never seen anyone do anything quite like that. I know there was a question in the chat. I don't know if I can or
Wait a
comment.
minute, sorry. No, so how about the time Chuck Rosiansky was barred from entering the Comic-Con ball in drag, and Craig decided he would escort Chuck as his date? Like,
Never heard that story. That's
what
great.
a Chuck story. Studying black and white movies is a great way to learn grayscale, blocking, and composition for comic. Yeah, those guys are masters, right?
Yeah.
The cinematographers.
Yeah.
I wish I could name them all. Those guys. Crime, it's another one of those things. Crime movies, those old crime movies. Just don't see them as much as you used to. You really have to seek them out if you want to see them.
Yeah, the younger generation don't even know. If I ask them who James Cagney is, or Edward G. Robinson, or Humphrey Bogart, they've never heard those names. A bigger shock, this because it's a little more recent. It's not that they've never seen a movie with him. They've never heard the name Marlon Brando.
Ooh, that makes me feel really old.
They say, yeah. Is that amazing?
Yeah. Or you give an Edward G. Robinson impersonation and they think it's Chief Wiggum.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Meow, she, meow. Love those guys. Love those dudes. You dirty rat. And for me, I got those references from watching Looney Tunes, and I don't even know that that's on the radar of anybody these days.
No, I don't think so. Time moves on.
Although I play them, my daughter Penny right now is binging. She binges on Looney Tunes like she is into like nothing else.
Oh, that's great. Well, they are the best.
Although I was mentioning, even I like I'm anti like censoring old stuff because of the context of the time. But even I get creeped out by Pepe Le Pew. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Some characters don't age very well.
Yeah, it's a shame that's such beautiful animation too. But for what I really like about it, I watch them on HBO Max, and they play they have all the old Looney Tunes all the way back to the 30s even, and pretty much uncensored.
That's great.
Yeah, we love them. So are these comics that you own, or you had to seek out, or they're just out of your private collection?
Both. About half and half. So actually a little less than half. I own most of them, and then when I was seeking out particular artists, then I started purchasing as well.
What was the hardest one to get a hold of?
I don't know. I did pretty well. eBay is an amazing thing.
And it's also, for as rare as these comics are, right? They're not as expensive as, say, like Silver Age Marvel.
No. Oh, not even close.
Oh, here we go. Mike Sikowski.
Yeah.
Wow, really? Wow, man.
I know.
This is better than his Justice League or whatever work. Like, this is really good looking stuff.
You know, some of the Silver Age artists' work in these comics, I don't have them in the book, but it's better than what they did then. And another example is Don Heck. And I was just looking at a Don Heck comic from then, and he was phenomenal.
And he's not someone who's known as like a top tier Marvel guy either necessarily, but
yeah, I'm not quite sure what happened. I don't know if, was he told to try to work in the Jack Kirby style? I don't see that in his work, but there became a softness to his work at Marvel in the 60s, and there was a hard edge to his crime and
totally
horror comics.
I think part of that was those were the older guys, right, that got work doing inks and embellishments and stuff at Marvel.
Right.
Maybe they were either past their prime or just past caring, or like thought that the level of craft that the medium had devolved to maybe didn't deserve like their high, and the fact that they still had not attained any respect in the field of comic books.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe.
Well,
maybe.
Oh, there's the Alex Toth. So
which is crazy because it doesn't look like Alex Toth. Like some of the other stuff looked more like what I would recognize as Toth. This is beautiful stuff.
it's beautiful stuff, and you can see he's being innovative with even the shape of the page.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
and there's less copy on the page. It's like the perfect story because it's all about juvenile delinquency and it's a crime comic. Um, it's really phenomenal, and it almost looks engraved, so everything about it looks different. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just I forget the name of that. There was a certain kind of paper that they used with ink and a chemical that brought out texture.
Like a Zipatone.
Wasn't Zipatone. They did use that too, but it was a certain kind of craft paper. Maybe somebody out there knows what it is. And
this kind of stuff, huh?
Yes, yeah. So
Look
that's actually
yeah.
comes through in the paper, and I'm sure that's how this story was done.
It just because when I think of Toth, I think of a lot more blacks than I do scratchy thin lines, right?
Right.
Mark, this is what it. Yeah, right. Duo shade might be the.
Maybe that's what it is. Yeah,
I think it might be. Mark is a cartoonist himself. He did some stuff that I reviewed recently on our $1 Million Mailbox show, and Mark's got some real skill. He also works in video games. And,
oh, great. Yeah. Hi, Mark.
We're almost done with this book, but I want to say, Toth, of all the names in here, I recognize a lot of them. A lot of them I didn't, but Toth is one to me that Toth is my thing.
Absolutely. So, there's also a Gene Colan story in there that looks nothing like Gene Colan,
which is super
as
cool,
we
right?
know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool to see them working their style and coming into their own. This is good stuff too. Oh man. Okay, how long did it take you to put this collection together? Like the book?
I think I worked on it for about 2 years. That sounds about right. But I'm a full-time professor, so.
Oh, okay.
I work throughout the year, but most of my working time is when I have downtime from school. But I think, start to finish, it was about 2 years coming. Yeah.
Okay. Any rights problems? Is this stuff all public domain?
All public domain. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's an Everett Raymond Kunstler illustration there. He's another one of the masters.
His name is Everett Raymond Kunstler?
Yeah.
That's his name? Oh, okay. Everett Raymond. Okay.
Oh, yeah. He used to sign the comics, Everett Raymond. And he passed away last year. I interviewed him. And those pieces at the end, the chapter openers that you had of Bonnie right there, that's done by my daughter, Jonna Brower. She did all the chapter openers and the title page.
It's great. It's a sharp looking package, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really thrilled with how it came out. And again, I thank Yo Books for indulging me because it is oversized. It's quite large. And
it's indulgent for sure, man.
Yeah.
Furnished, oversized, but worth it. This is the material that deserves that kind of presentation.
I agree.
Thank you. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, just a quick aside. So I interviewed Everett for about, 2 hours about his career, and he was just this fascinating man. He became a portrait artist for the White House. So if you look him up, you'll see. Yeah, he moved on. But he never disavowed his comics work. He was always quite proud of his comics work. But when we got to crime comics, so I began to ask him questions, was it different to do crime comics? And did you like that genre? And his answer was, all comics were the same to me. And that was the end of the conversation.
That's a very professional cartoonist of that era thing to say, I think, though.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like if it's paying my mortgage and and if it keeps gas in the car, that's what matters to me.
Right.
Adams too. Okay, you've also got not extensive, but you endnoted. There's not much text to read outside of your intro. But
Right.
what I liked is that you footnoted it and you cited all of your sources, which is just something that not many people really do. I mean, outside
it's really important to do, I think.
Yeah, a full set of endnotes so you can check your sources. We can check on what's going on. This is a lovely thing. It's $39.99 in this oversized form. Let me see. We can to put it in context. It's bigger than my head. Okay. Right. This is a good thing. And for $40, you're going to get more of the great works of the crime masters than you would get by buying one single issue. And you're going to get a lot of loads and loads of context here from Steven. I think that you guys should pick up Crime Comics Confidential as soon as you can. Steven, what's next?
Actually, I can't say because I don't have a contract yet. But something is definitely in the works.
Cool. Okay, well, I'd like to hear that. Would you consider coming back and talking about it here when you're able to?
Oh, I would love to. This has been a lot of fun, Dan. So absolutely.
I appreciate it. I would love to go on longer. I have a lot more questions, but I have to. I got to take care of business, like we talked about.
Of course, go take care of your daughter.
So we'll have a rain check to talk about your next project for sure.
Great.
And that's going to be awesome. I really appreciate you coming in, Steven. Thanks.
Oh, Dan, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Go have fun with you, daughter.
Thanks. I'm going to shut this thing down and close down the stream. If you want to stick around, I might have a minute to talk to you, or I might have to go. But
you run. Listen, you go. We'll catch up next time.
Thanks again, Steven. You're fantastic.
Okay, man. It was great. Thank you.
Speaking of fantastic, that was a fantastic show. Steven is really knowledgeable. I like these academic types who clearly were just like, obviously was a nerd, obviously liked comics, became a teacher and just like couldn't give it up. And it's like, how do I take this thing I love and make money off of it and like maybe even teach some people, make a career. He's done a lot of great stuff. I suggest you check out Crime Comics Confidential and his upcoming work. We'll be talking about it as soon as we can, as soon as it's not top secret anymore. We will talk about it here. Thank you guys for checking out the show today. Please consider hitting like on this video if you liked it. If you didn't like it, you can hit that dislike thing. It's fine. It's okay. I won't take it personally unless you don't leave a comment to tell me what went wrong with the interview. We need that feedback. Come back on Friday for Serious Star Trek. Talk about it then come back on Tuesday for Danger Room, and we'll talk about who knows what. For now, I'm going to play the final closing credits and a comic book cameo at the end. I'm not even sure what it's going to be. Like any good comic book show, we've got comic book cameos. So check out the credits and come and join me again. Talk to me again when? Next time.